Hello everyone, and welcome to a last minute theory video. In this one, I'll be presenting a few theories on how Planar Arcadia will be moving forward, as well as developing some of my other and previous theories, with newer information that we have received over the 4.1. So spoilers for Honkai Star Rail 4.0, 4.1, and Honkai Star Rail in general. However, before I start, I think I will address a previous idea I had in my Star Rail video of 4.1 and beyond lore video. I jokingly pointed out the similarities with 4.0 and Persona 5, but now with the addition of Terminal Station, we have mementos, so Honkai Star Rail is now Persona confirmed. Anyway, back to the lore. For my first theory, this is about Ryusuke's fate and his involvement in the story. For this theory, I believe not only is he connected to Fourwish and is also responsible for the abundance entering Planar Arcadia, but he will also betray Fourwish and potentially die. The reasons and evidence I have for this idea is earlier in 4.1, he explained he had connections to the Elixir Seekers, which are a largely abundance-focused faction, with the goal of founding Yaoshi to obtain immortality, which he planned to use to cure Himeko. He is also the Dean of Graphia Academy, and so he would know or even have connections to Fourwish, as she was a student alongside Himeko and was present during the Herald of Death's attack. Ryusuke's motivation was to save Himeko from the Weathering Curse, as he wasn't sure how it could be achieved. I believe for this theory that Ryusuke, during his time seeking out potential cures, and with the Elixir Seekers, he discovered their goal of obtaining immortality, and after the previous thoughts that not even an Aeon could cure the Weathering Curse, as a previous Graphia family member had won the Phantasm Ring games and asked Aha for a cure, but Aha wasn't able to. And after discovering the Aeon could not cure the Weathering Curse, he took this idea of immortality and created his own version of it through wish power and the power of abundance, which he got from the Elixir Seekers, to cure Himeko or even bring back those killed by the Herald of Death, which is why Fourwish could be involved due to their influence and their motivation as a previous victim. And due to Fourwish's ability, influence, and resources, they can manipulate the wish power of the people, as a seen during 4.1 with the Trailblazer, and with this, allow for a more easier time using wish power as a resource for this immortality. I believe Evanescia is a consequence of this immortality attempt, and I will dive into it more with my next theory. Ultimately, I believe now he knows for certainty Himeko was seemingly cured of the Weathering Curse. His involvement with the previous plan and agreement with Fourwish and potentially Elixir Seekers will end, and he will leave them or even betray them if they are a risk to Planar Arcadia or Himeko, as Himeko was his main motivation. And I do believe that if he does betray them, he might ultimately die, due to his connections with Himeko and the fact that Planar Arcadia will most likely be a tragic ending, as I don't believe they would outright kill Himeko, but instead kill her father, who she just gotten back and seeming to have a decent relationship now that they are together again. For my next theory, I will be expanding on what I said about Evanescia, as with the reveal she is an abomination of abundance. I believe she isn't fully one, but instead that she is a dead student brought back to life with wish power and abundance as a test to see if immortality is possible, or if the people killed by the Herald of Death can be brought back to life. This idea and theory makes sense, as it would explain her ability to create masks, as if the masks were solely created with wish power, I believe anyone with sufficient ability would be able to make them and enter the games as a supplicant. But it also explains why, in the Academy and the class photos, that there are traces of her existing and that being there during 4.0, as she would have been a previous student who died and potentially brought back and more visibly seen with the wish power. So it's sort of like reality is folding in on itself. The memories from before are still there. This also explains why there might be two versions of her that I presented as a theory in my previous video of the 4.0 and beyond lore speculations, where her soul or memories, which I believe would be the fox in her splash art, is the original version of her that was killed in the attack by the Herald of Death. But her body is like a husk, which was being run and operated with the power of abundance and wish power to help her exist or bring her back. I do believe that she is still alive, so her body would have memories, but the memories from when she died have been separated from the body, so two versions of her exist. One where she is dead after her death, and one where she died but was brought back to life. So they both are the same person, it's just their memories are different, one being dead, one being alive, so they are still the same person in essence. I believe that her soul, or the original one, is being kept alive as a side effect due to the wish power, as it would explain how, and it would make sense as it would be considered an imaginary. And that could be the blueprint for her soul, as they would need something to base her off, or potentially memories from the memory zone. But I believe wish power is more likely due to it being more prominent in Planar Arcadia. This idea means that she was alive at one point during her time at Graphia Academy as a student, but was killed during the Herald of Death's attack. And this is important, but I believe that she potentially had no family or guardians or connections, which would have meant no one would have realistically missed or noticed her if she had died during the attack, which Ryusuke would have known as he is the dean, or even Foolish would have known, as she could have potentially known Evanescia during their times as students. And because of this knowledge that she might not have had any connections or anyone to notice her death or potentially even mourn her, which is upsetting, but they could have taken advantage of this and chosen her as the perfect trial and test subject, as no one would notice if a person who was dead came back to life if no one originally knew they existed. Foolwish's goal to bring eternal laughter to Planar Arcadia would not be possible if people died, and this, I believe, is her motivation for why she is potentially working with Abundance and Ryusuke as a goal to create immortality, as if people die, it would ruin her idea of eternal laughter, and so she is trying to correct the mistakes created by the Herald of Death of them killing the people and their victims. This idea is further reinforced as in the ending of 4.1, Evanescia said she was created, and her being created with wish power and abundance would enable her to create masks and potentially do more in the games, being its arbitrator. I believe that the abundance sustaining her is the tree in the Phantasmian courtyard, as not only is it similar to the ambrosial arbitrary, but it would also be where the abundance and wish power from the elation concentrate the most, due to it being the Phantasmian courtyard and having the tree there. So I believe that it makes the most sense that's where she would go to recharge herself to continue existing, as that's where she could be to refuel both abundance and elation. For my next theory, I believe that the Voracity, or the remains of the Voracity, is imprisoned in Planar Arcadia, specifically the world in canvas, and is attempting to break free from it, and that the Graphia family and the Weathering Curse is a way to sacrifice the family members to keep it trapped. Firstly, I'll explain how I think the Voracity was trapped, as I believe Akavili and Aha were the ones to trap them in the canvas world, as that would explain the existence of Terminal Station and Land of the Sneering Gods, and why it would seem to be a train station-esque building at the very end, as they would have had to previously escape their own trap after capturing Oroborus. The reason I believe the Voracity was trapped in the scroll is because they seemingly vanished and are currently missing, and this would mean that they are only able to break free now after Tazarov's defeat, and potentially due to their death, allowing Oroborus to slowly regain the power of the Path of Voracity and enable them to escape. The land of sneering gods is found inside the torn scroll, and I believe that the world in canvas is its cage, and the mouth at the background of Terminal Station that is seemingly consuming the environment is the method of the Voracity is using to escape. This escape could be created by opening tears and by eating the scroll. This would mean that the Voracity is trying to eat away at the scroll until it can't be held back, or there is insufficient amount of the canvas to keep it trapped. The reason I believe that the Weathering Curse is a way to keep the Voracity held is that I believe it is essentially a way to sacrifice the descendants of the Graphia family in order to feed the Voracity trapped in the canvas and scroll, or even Oroborus themselves. And this sacrifice will mean that the Voracity would instead consume the family members of Graphia to satiate them instead of consuming the scroll that is keeping them prisoner. So in exchange for not eating at its cage, it's eating the food being given to it. This leads to the correlation of Himeko surviving the curse or seemingly being cured of it, and the tears being created at the end of 4.1, as because Himeko didn't die to the curse, the sacrifice was never accomplished, so the Voracity was able to keep eating the scroll and is slowly breaking free. The reason I believe Aha and Akavili were the ones to trap Oroborus or the Voracity comes from two potential ideas that come about from this theory. Firstly, it explains why the entity the Trailblazer talks to, who takes on their appearance, would recognize the power of the Trailblaze. But if you also saw my previous Trailblazer and Terminus theory, I believe that the Trailblazer could become Akavili, or a new version of the Trailblaze, and how Oroborus would have been from a previous cycle, potentially like Amphorius, and able to recognize them from the previous cycle, like how the Titans were able to recognize how Castris' sister was able to recognize Castris. And secondly, the most important one, I believe that I will potentially be making its own video dedicated to this idea. I believe that trapping Oroborus is how Akavili died, as I believe they stayed behind to ensure Aha could escape and that the trap would be safely closed. This would explain why Aha cried when Akavili died, because they could have potentially both been willing to die to seal the Voracity, or Akavili had promised, or something went horribly wrong and had to sacrifice themselves to ensure that the plan went through. This would explain why no one knows why Akavili just disappeared, as no one other than Aha would know what truly happened. The Voracity being trapped in the land of the sneering gods could explain why Ashveils recognizes it as familiar, as I believe he is cursed by the Voracity. And for the final theory of this video, I'll be presenting the idea on why and how Ashveils got cursed by the Voracity. We know he seemingly received it from a navigator of the Express named Icy, and that he is old due to him knowing Blade by his real name before he had become a Stellar Hunter and went by the identity of Blade. And next, we also know Ashveils has become nigh immortal, I believe, by mistake, and he has killed multiple emanators such as Zulu, the Lord Ravager, and Shuhu. He participated in the attack on Zulu and potentially on Shuhu as well. I believe that the reason he is Voracity is not only does it mean killing and devouring an emanator of abundance like Shuhu confirm that the curse is Voracity, as I believe only the destruction, nihility, or Voracity would be able to permanently kill an immortal creature like an abomination or emanator of abundance. I believe that this is because nihility, as seen with Acheron and Penacony, has the potential to negate things, which is why she was asked to leave. Destruction, as seen with Phynon and the Core Flames, can scratch or wound an Aeon, like Nanook, and the Lord Ravager's existence and Iron Tomb's intent and near completion of the goal to kill and noose or overthrow noose makes sense that those paths would be able to inherently damage or kill immortal things. And I believe Voracity would go alongside them, as it due to its ability to devour everything indiscriminately. Immortal or not, it will be devoured. I believe that makes sense. I believe that after Aha and Akavili trapped Oroborus, and Akavili had died, Oroborus had placed a curse on the Trailblaze, and potentially the Nameless, in one way or another, where a remnant of the Voracity from before their sealing could have cursed them, either with a physical object, or it was the lingering will of the Aeon. And I believe that this curse would have been passed down, or potentially avoided, or found by the Trailblazers and Nameless of those times, to either hide it, seal it, or deal with it. And eventually, Icy, who either gave Ashveils the curse directly, or helped him find a way to obtain the curse, to gain the power of Voracity. But due to Ashveils' seeming attitude towards the curse, I believe he was unwillingly given it, as it wouldn't make sense. Or either he was unwillingly given it, or he got it willingly, but due to some actions, such as Shuhu, it has gone horribly different from what he intended it to be done. I believe that the devouring of Shuhu would explain why he's immortal, or seemingly immortal, as it is similar to Blade's immortality, as Shuhu blessed Blade inadvertently and gave him immortality because of the transmutation arcanum, and due to being corrupted by the flesh of Shuhu. That is why Blade is immortal. But I believe that because Ashveils devoured Shuhu itself, he would have similar effects to Blade, but potentially, and most likely, a much greater scale due to having consumed Shuhu itself, not just a piece of its flesh. This would explain why he's so desperate for death, similar to Blade, as he seems to want to chase a peaceful ending for himself, as that is his goal with Pearl in their deal. And lastly, a little side theory is that Ashveils will not be the one to kill Blade, as if he can devour Shuhu, and as he has, I believe that this is one of the ways that Blade could potentially die. But due to Ashveils' personality, he doesn't seem like the person to kill another for mercy with his curse, especially as he seems to have known Blade pre-Shuhu, so I don't believe he would willingly kill a friend, or even someone who might remember things and can relate to him, as they both seemingly immortal, despite Blade being branded a criminal by the IPC due to being a Stellaron hunter, and thus being able to fulfill Ashveils' conditions of only using it on criminals. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you will have a nice day, morning, or evening, and thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video.